Sir, unmute yourself, Dr. Jasjeet.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sodhi, for the kind introduction. And I thank the organizers for pushing me up the line for my presentation. It's always a pleasure to be back on the scientific platform of RSSDI. So when Dr. Bansi discussed this topic with me, my first instant answer was, we all talk about technology, new drugs, new innovations in the field of diabetes. So when I came across this topic first, I went back to the OPD thinking about sitting there. And that's where I thought that this is the kind of topic I should take up. It required me to read a lot, brush up the knowledge, because this is an extremely common problem that we all treating diabetes face day in and day out. So on one hand, we have a lot of development in a lot of fields, therapeutics, technology. However, the chronicity of diabetes is related to a lot of these problems, which I feel at this point of time are not addressed to the level which they should be. So hence today in the next 15-20 minutes, I would be talking about chronic diarrhea in diabetes and using the acronym of DD of diabetic diarrhea. So our targets for therapy in diabetes are to prevent acute and chronic complications. And each one of these slides I have prepared as if a patient is sitting in front of me. It's not loaded with numbers or randomized control trials, but I felt that a patient is sitting in front of me when I was preparing these slides. So whatever we do in therapy of diabetes is primarily related to prevention of acute and chronic complications and to provide maximum quantity and quality of life. Now, the quality of life aspect is extremely important. Again, in the outpatient setting, see these three problems which are enumerated on the slide: GI disorders, peripheral neuropathy, and erectile dysfunction, to me as a clinician, contribute majorly and have a major impact on the quality of life. Hence, we need to understand them, appreciate them. When a patient comes up with these symptoms, think of the possible reasons and offer them solutions. And that's how we are not just adding quantity of life, but we would be majorly contributing to the patient's quality of life. So it's like a happy, healthy life for a diabetic without complications. And that's how I looked at the topic when I was preparing the slides. So coming to some factual important things about diarrhea in diabetes. So this is a specific entity. It's primarily a diagnosis of exclusion. The prevalence of GI disorders in diabetes range to as much as high as 70%. Again, we must go back to our OPDs and see how commonly the patients talk about their GI symptoms, be it upper GI, mid GI, or low GI symptoms, which I'll enumerate in the subsequent slides. The prevalence of GI disorders, including diabetic diarrhea, are somewhat more prevalent in females as compared to males. There is some data talking about the fact the level of the control and the duration of diabetes may be contributing to the occurrence of diarrhea in diabetes and other GI disorders. Presence of psychological comorbidities like depression and anxiety aggravate the presence of these symptoms, or the symptoms get aggravated in patients who have pre-existing psychological comorbidities. And there have been studies which have shown with the onset of depression, there is a 3 times greater onset of GI symptoms in patients with diabetes. And once these mood disorders are taken care of, there is a 2 times greater chance of resolution of GI symptoms. So just by this data which I've shared, automatically comes to our mind that there is something working with the neurological system. Would it be the brain, the peripheral nervous system, which is actually contributing to the occurrence and maybe a solution to GI related problems in diabetes, including diabetes diarrhea. Now, if we talk about longevity, there's not much data about GI related symptoms or diabetic diarrhea contributing to mortality. However, these symptoms have a major impact on the quality of life. And as I said in the beginning couple of slides, that the ideal treatment of diabetes is one which is contributing to both quantity and quality of life. Interesting data. We'll have a discussion and a lecture on gastroparesis. So I won't go in the details of that, but so important is the impact of GI disorders in diabetes that gastroparesis is associated with a reduction in the annual income by about 30%. And on top of that, we've had a lot of sessions on new drugs, including the oldest and the king of diabetes treatment, metformin, and the newer drugs also to some extent are contributing to the GI symptoms being aggravated, like the GLP-1 RAs in our patients with diabetes. A very interesting study in newly diagnosed diabetics showed that patients who were started on metformin and had some level of metformin intolerance, there was a 40% reduced adherence or compliance in these patients. So this is how important or the impact of GI disturbances, including diarrhea and diabetes, is on the patient's life. And again, for the cost of the therapy, these symptoms are actually pretty resistant to treatment. A lot of times they are ignored, not addressed, hence contributing majorly to the outpatient or the inpatient cost borne by the patient. Of all the GI symptoms that we know of, diabetic diarrhea is possibly the most debilitating of the GI associations with diabetes. So this publication in Diabetes Care in 2018 actually, if you all could see, gives a kind of a percentage of symptoms and the type of diabetes. Now, I would request all of us seeing these slides to think about your average day in the OPD with the patients and see how many percentage of these patients come up with these complaints. And maybe in the next 10 patients, actively ask them about the question about maybe reflux, nausea, vomiting, bloating, early satiety, postprandial fullness, diarrhea. And interestingly, the topic for today being diabetic diarrhea, up to 35% of type 2 diabetics have diabetic or diarrhea, or maybe diabetic diarrhea, which we'll come to in their course of their illness. So it is a very, very prevalent problem in our patients with diabetes. And on top of that, a lot of these GI symptoms may also be related to the older or the newer drugs, which again, we'll be briefly mentioning. So coming specific to diarrhea in diabetes, which is a specific diagnosis in diabetes. However, there is a lot of confusion about the correct definition of diarrhea itself. So I tried to search the literature, and the best I could find is defining chronic diarrhea in diabetes by using the Diabetes Bowel Symptom Questionnaire, which says that diarrhea in diabetes is a qualified statement when watery or loose stools are occurring more than 25% of the times. Some of the important clinical presentations which help in focusing on the diagnosis of diabetes in diarrhea are, it is a painless watery diarrhea, which is the duration of chronicity by this particular article was more than 6 weeks. These patients usually have long-standing diabetes with a mean duration of 8 years. associated poor glycemic control. And a lot of these patients have associated symptoms suggesting autonomic or peripheral neuropathy. Characteristically, if we were to call it diarrhea, chronic diarrhea of diabetes, the stools should be non-bloody, indicating a non-infectious reason. It's more prevalent in females, like we talked about, that the overall GI disorders are more prevalent in female diabetics. And very characteristically, the episodes of diarrhea are interspersed with times of normal bowel habits or constipation. Now, we need to go back to our OPD setting again and see how common this particular the symptomatology or possible diagnosis is in our patients. The two most characteristic features of diabetic diarrhea are nocturnal diarrhea and fecal incontinence. So with these two characteristic symptoms, we almost are sure of the diagnosis of diabetic diarrhea or chronic diarrhea in diabetes. However, we need to rule out a whole lot of other things. And so this becomes a diagnosis of exclusion. We'll touch about the various common and relevant diagnoses that we usually look at, investigate to come to a final diagnosis of chronic diarrhea because of diabetes. The pathophysiology of chronic diarrhea and diabetes is centered around neuropathy, whether it is autonomic or specific focal enteric neuropathy. It basically leads to changes in the motility of the small and the large intestine. The three main cells which have been studied as pathophysiological defects in diabetes diarrhea are the interstitial cells of Cajal, the enteric glial cells, and the smooth muscle cells. There are also documented changes in the ion transport and the intestinal absorption of liquid and electrolytes. Along with this, incipient changes in epithelial damage and changes or regression in the colonic stem cells. So this basically, once we see this slide, it's all centered around a possible neural cause of the pathophysiology of diabetes diarrhea. Well, as I said earlier, that it's a diagnosis of exclusion. So we need to look at the common drugs, offending drugs, which can cause diarrhea in our diabetics. Most common being metformin, which I'll talk about a little more, the GLP-1 RAs, the AGIs, and for the obese diabetics, use of Orlistat. This would more or less take care of the commonly used drugs associated with diarrhea in patients with diabetes. Dietary factors, celiac disease, when we're talking about type 1 diabetes, the prevalence is pretty high. And at diagnosis or with the patient presenting with diarrhea in type 1 diabetes, we always look for a possibility of celiac disease. Pancreatic exocrine insufficiency, again, in type 2, we know diabetes in itself is a risk factor for chronic pancreatitis, and exocrine insufficiency may manifest as chronic diarrhea. Small intestinal bowel overgrowth. So it's basically what happens because of altered peristalsis, be it the small or the large intestine, leads to a whole lot of stasis of the intestine, leading to bacterial overgrowth, and this may in itself aggravate the diarrhea in diabetes. We have to look for irritable or inflammatory bowel syndrome, the diagnosis of which comes from the historical aspect, the quality of diarrhea, whether it's associated with constitutional symptoms. There's blood mixed diarrhea, differentiating it from chronic diarrhea of diabetes, where it is plain watery diarrhea. So presence of blood, mucus, or purulent stools should indicate or help us investigate in the lines of inflammatory bowel syndrome. Microscopic colitis is also another differential diagnosis, diagnose on colonoscopy once we decide and rule out other things, taking multiple biopsy and forming the diagnosis. So this, in a very basic form or a easily accessible form, helps us know which possibility we're looking at. Coming back to our day-to-day practice, metformin is one of the most common offending agents for diarrhea in our diabetics, which we always consider, and we need to address in the right way to ensure this particular differential for chronic diarrhea and diabetes is taken care of. So going a little in the details of the pathophysiology, it's the leading reason for diarrhea and diabetes. There is reduction in the neuron numbers in the ileal myenteric plexus. The total ganglionic area is reduced. One important set of neurons, the nitric neurons, which basically produce nitrous oxide, which is basically an inhibitory to peristalsis. So once you reduce this, the overall peristalsis would increase, and increased peristalsis would increase or would be associated with diarrhea. There are two phases in this, in which initial there would be stunning of activity, and studies have shown usage of insulin and tight glycemic control can help to restore the neuronal activity. If left untreated or unaddressed for a long period of time with poor glycemic control, it would lead to apoptosis of these cells, which become irreversible. Also, there is an altered sympathetic and parasympathetic neuronal activity, along with increased coupling of the smooth muscle neuronal activity. Hence, in this, there is overall, for example, in the fasting state, reduced frequency and amplitude of the pressure generating activity interspersed with bursts of motility generating activity. Hence, the diarrhea would not happen throughout the day. Intermittent diarrhea, and a very characteristic feature of diabetic diarrhea, it's nocturnal diarrhea, would happen because of these possible reasons. There are accelerated small and colonic intestine and colonic transits. The muscles of the colon exhibit altered contraction and relaxation, all of it presenting as diarrhea in a patient with long-standing diabetes. There's altered iron transport in the gut, which would lead to greater electrolyte and fluid accumulation inside the gut rather than its absorption, aggravating the diarrhea. And histopathological changes in the gut in patients with diabetic diarrhea include Pheocrypts, longer villi, sclerosis of the lamina propria, reduction in the myenteric plexus, loss of paracellular permeability, and very importantly, reduction in the colonic stem cells, which have a potential to regenerate into the protective gut cells. The most important differential diagnosis, as I said, would be drug-induced in our day-to-day practice. So if I were to go back in time and think about the last maybe 15, 20 years we've been treating diabetes, this seems to be the most common and the most important aspect whenever a patient with diarrhea presents to us in the outpatient. Metformin has been there over numerous decades. We have recently the GLP-1 RAs, both of them contributing to most of the drug-induced diarrhea in diabetes. And obviously we have the AGIs also, which may have significant GI side effects. Very importantly and interestingly, though the drug has been there for so many decades, we are gaining more and more knowledge about its functionality, how it acts, and the possible reasons for the side effects or diarrhea associated with metformin. So as you can see in this slide, these are the various mechanisms by which metformin interacts in the gut, and some of these reasons may contribute to diarrhea. For example, metformin usage has been shown to cause increased accumulation of the bile acid pool, and it activates the bile acid receptors. Hence, the increase in the intraluminal bile may cause osmotic diarrhea. No, very common side effect of metformin is a patient coming back to us saying that they have a very funny metallic taste in their mouth. And a possible mechanism is the secretion of metformin via the OCT3 receptors in the salivary gland, which may cause these altered sensations. We all know about the lactate generating capacity of metformin. This also happens in the gut, may or may not be contributing to the diarrhea associated. Very well documented effect of metformin is on directly increasing the levels of GLP-1. Hence, coming to back to the clinic, most of the patients who have a heightened GI side effects with metformin, possibly through the GLP-1 RAs, in my clinical practice, I have observed them to be super sensitive to GLP-1 RAs. So a possible common mechanistic way in which metformin contributes to chronic diarrhea. There's a whole lot of understanding about gut microbiota and metformin in a positive way for better glycemic control, better health, contributes to change in the gut microbiota. However, these alterations may also promote occurrence of diarrhea. The oral bioavailability of metformin being about 40 to 60%, and it is mainly transporter dependent. So genetic variations in these transporters can lead to decreased absorption, systemic absorption of metformin. So for example, if we were to knock out these receptors, the side effects or the adverse GI side effects majorly get aggravated. So again, mechanistically understanding how and why metformin may be associated with diarrhea in our patients with diabetes. Metformin has a structural similarity to agonists of the 5-HT3 receptor, stimulation of which can cause nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. It may stimulate serotonin release, and inhibition of dopamine oxidase leads to increased levels of histamine, again, which may present with diarrhea, vomiting, flushing, and all those kind of symptoms. The important and interesting thing about metformin and diarrhea is it may not be entirely dose dependent. Reduction of the dose may lead to betterment or disappearance of the symptoms. If that does not happen, withdrawal before putting the patient through a colonoscopy, endoscopy, reduction in the doses, or stopping the metformin leads to the diagnosis or proving the diagnosis of metformin associated diarrhea. Number two, again, very interesting. It may not be related to the time the metformin is instituted. It may be a very late or a very late side effect of metformin. So even after 10 years of exposure to metformin, and this, what I'm saying, is primarily related to our practice over the last 2.5 decades, that even after long-term exposure to metformin, a patient presenting with diarrhea or such lower GI side effects, reduction of dose of metformin does help a lot in these patients. So we should not fix our minds that starting a drug, we need to have the side effect. Metformin is very peculiar in this way that even long-term exposure can lead to such lower GI side effects. So what I follow and what I discuss is the metformin rule of half, where half of the patients, about 50 to 75% on metformin, are intolerant at some point of time to some extent, which may or may not affect their quality of life. Of these, 50% or above have more pronounced intolerance requiring dose reduction. So I would first reduce the dose to half. And in this, 60 to 70% of the patients resolve. If not, then I would reduce the dose further or even decide to discontinue metformin. And of these 50%, they cannot tolerate metformin at all. And that would amount to about 2 to 5% patients in my practice. There is no published data on these percentages. So these are emanating more from our my practice and the experience of my colleagues, mentors. So these are the other diagnoses which we need to look at: celiac disease, pancreatic exocrine insufficiency. So I've covered most of these. And once you've ruled out all of these reasons, then it is viable to go ahead with a colonoscopy or get the help of our colleagues in gastroenterology to give the patient a resolution of these symptoms. This is how the flow chart of assessing chronic diarrhea and diabetes would flow. First, from a history, as we talked about, certain vital characteristics of diabetes for making a diagnosis of chronic diarrhea of diabetes. Once we rule out the triggers, most common of them being metformin. We go to the next level of evaluation with laboratory workup. In case Stetora is there, do a fecal elastase. We are suspecting an exocrine deficiency, watery diarrhea. Look for the celiac disease. And finally, if nothing works, then a colonoscopy, multiple biopsy, and help from our colleagues in gastroenterology. So the last slide basically talks about management. These are all the choices available. I'll stop here in summarizing my talk. The GI disorders in diabetes are very common, the major impact of them being on the quality of life. And one of the goals, which I always follow and will follow, would be to provide the largest quantity as well as quality of life, making these kind of patient-related complaints very important to be assessed and addressed to logically give them a better quality of life. And it's one of the diabetic diarrhea is one of the most debilitating GI complications. And it mainly is a diagnosis of exclusion, with the main contribution of long-standing, poorly controlled diabetes leading to neuronal dysfunction, which produces this watery diarrhea. And metformin should always be considered as the #1 differential diagnosis for diarrhea, chronic diarrhea, and diabetes. I thank all of you for your kind listening.